The fourth President of the United States. James Madison, 1809 to 1817. The names, biographies, and achievements of the Presidents of the United States since its founding. We continue the fourth President of the United States of America. The fourth President of the United States. James Madison, 1809 to 1817. Part 1. James Madison, known as the Father of the Constitution, played a crucial role in drafting and promoting the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights. His presidency is most notable for the War of 1812 against Great Britain, which ended in a stalemate but confirmed American independence and strengthened national identity. James Madison, 1751 to 1836, was a founding father of the United States and the fourth American president, serving in office from 1809 to 1817. An advocate for a strong federal government, the Virginia-born Madison composed the first drafts of the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights and earned the nickname Father of the Constitution. In 1792, Madison and Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826, founded the Democratic-Republican Party, which has been called America's first opposition political party. When Jefferson became the third U.S. president, Madison served as his Secretary of State. In this role, he oversaw the Louisiana Purchase from the French in 1803. During his presidency, Madison led the U.S. into the controversial War of 1812-15, against Great Britain. After 2 terms in the White House, Madison retired to his Virginia plantation, Montpelier, with his wife Dolly, 1768 to 1849. James Madison was born on March 16, 1751, in Port Conway, Virginia, to James Madison Sr. and Nellie Conway Madison. The oldest of 12 children, Madison was raised on the family plantation, Montpelier, in Orange County, Virginia. At age 18, Madison left Montpelier to attend the College of New Jersey, now Princeton University. Did you know? Montpelier, James Madison's Virginia plantation home, was established by his grandfather in 1723. An estimated 100 enslaved people lived at Montpelier when Madison owned it. The property was sold after this death. Today, the estate, which covers some 2,600 acres, is open to the public. After graduation, Madison took an interest in the relationship between the American colonies and Britain, which had grown tumultuous over the issue of British taxation. When Virginia began preparing for the American Revolutionary War, 1775 to 83, Madison was appointed a colonel in the Orange County militia. Small in stature and sickly, he soon gave up a military career for a political one. In 1776, he represented Orange County at the Virginia Constitution Convention to organize a new state government no longer under British rule. During his work in the Virginia legislature, Madison met lifelong friend Thomas Jefferson, 1743 to 1826, author of the Declaration of Independence and the third President of the United States. As a politician, Madison often fought for religious freedom, believing it was an individual's right from birth. In 1780, Madison became a Virginia delegate to the Continental Congress in Philadelphia. He left Congress in 1783 to return to the Virginia Assembly and work on a religious freedom statute, though he would soon be called back to Congress to help create a new constitution. After the colonies declared independence from Britain in 1776, the Articles of Confederation were created as the first Constitution of the United States. The Articles were ratified in 1781 and gave most of the power to the individual state legislatures who acted more like individual countries than a union. This structure left the National Congress weak, with no ability to properly manage federal debt or maintain a national army. Madison, after undertaking an extensive study of other world governments, came to the conclusion that America needed a strong federal government in order to help regulate the state legislatures and create a better system for raising federal money. He felt the government should be set up with a system of checks and balances so no branch had greater power over the other. Madison also suggested that governors and judges have enhanced roles in government in order to help manage the state legislatures. In May 1787, delegates from each state came together at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and Madison was able to present his ideas for an effective government system in his Virginia plan, which detailed a government with 3 branches: legislative, executive, and judicial. This plan would form the basis of the U.S. Constitution. Madison took detailed notes during debates at the convention, which helped to further shape the U.S. Constitution and led to his moniker, Father of the Constitution. Madison stated the Constitution was not the offspring of a single brain, but instead, the work of many heads and many hands. Once the new Constitution was written, it needed to be ratified by 9 of the 13 states. This was not an easy process, as many states felt the Constitution gave the federal government too much power. Supporters of the Constitution were known as Federalists, while critics were called Anti-Federalists. Madison played a strong role in the ratification process and wrote a number of essays outlining his support for the Constitution. His writings, along with those penned by other advocates, were released anonymously under the title The Federalist, a series of 85 essays produced between 1787 and 1788. After extensive debate, the U.S. Constitution was signed by members of the Constitutional Convention in September 1787. The document was ratified by the states in 1788 and the new government became functional the following year. Madison was elected to the newly formed U.S. House of Representatives, where he served from 1789 to 1797. In Congress, he worked to draft the Bill of Rights, a group of 10 amendments to the Constitution that spelled out fundamental rights, such as freedom of speech and religion, held by U.S. citizens. The Bill of Rights was ratified by the states in 1791. In the new, more powerful Congress, Madison and Jefferson soon found themselves disagreeing with the Federalists on key issues dealing with federal debt and power. For example, the two men favored states' rights and opposed Federalist leader Alexander Hamilton's, circa 1755 to 1804, proposal for a national bank, the Bank of the United States. In 1792, Jefferson and Madison founded the Democratic-Republican Party, which has been labeled America's first opposition political party. Jefferson, Madison, and James Monroe, 1758 to 1831, were the only Democratic Republicans ever to become U.S. presidents, as the party divided into competing factions in the 1820s. Madison also had a new development in his personal life. In 1794, after a brief courtship, the 43-year-old Madison married 26-year-old Dolly Payne Todd, 1768 to 1849, an outgoing Quaker widow with one son. Dolly's personality contrasted sharply with that of the quiet, reserved Madison. She loved entertaining and hosted many receptions and dinner parties during which Madison could meet other influential figures of his time. During the couple's 41-year marriage, Dolly Madison and James Madison were reportedly rarely apart. Through the years, Madison's friendship with Jefferson would continue to thrive. When Jefferson became the third president of the United States, he appointed Madison as Secretary of State. In this position, which he held from 1801 to 1809, Madison helped acquire the Louisiana Territory from the French in 1803. The Louisiana Purchase doubled the size of America. In 1807, Madison and Jefferson enacted an embargo on all trade with Britain and France. The two European countries were at war and, angered by America's neutrality, they had begun attacking U.S. ships at sea. However, the embargo hurt America and its merchants and sailors more than Europe, which did not need the American goods. Jefferson ended the embargo in 1809 as he left office. In the presidential election of 1808, Madison defeated Federalist candidate Charles Cotesworth Pinckney, 1745 to 1825, to become the nation's fourth chief executive. Madison continued to face problems from overseas, as Britain and France had continued their attacks on American ships following the embargo. In addition to impeding U.S. trade, Britain took U.S. sailors for its own navy and began supporting American Indians in battles against U.S. settlers. In retaliation, Madison issued a war proclamation against Britain in 1812. However, America was not ready for a war. Congress had not properly funded or prepared an army, and a number of the states did not support what was referred to as Mr. Madison's War and would not allow their militias to join the campaign. Despite these setbacks, American forces attempted to fight off and attack British forces. The U.S. met defeat much of the time both on land and at sea, but its well-built ships proved to be formidable foes. As the War of 1812 continued, Madison ran for re-election against Federalist candidate DeWitt Clinton, 1767 to 1828, who was also supported by an anti-war faction of the Democratic-Republican Party, and won. Despite the victory, Madison was often criticized and blamed for the difficulties stemming from the war. Trade stopped between the U.S. and Europe, hurting American merchants once again. New England threatened secession from the Union. The Federalists undermined Madison's efforts, and Madison was forced to flee Washington, D.C., in August 1814 as British troops invaded and burned buildings, including the White House, the Capitol, and the Library of Congress. Finally, weary from battle, Britain and the U.S. agreed to negotiate an end to the war. The Treaty of Ghent was signed in December 1814 in Europe. Before word of the peace agreement reached America, a major victory for U.S. troops at the Battle of New Orleans, December 1814 to January 1815, helped shine a positive light on the controversial war. Though the war was mismanaged, there were some key victories that emboldened the Americans. Once blamed for the errors in the war, Madison was eventually hailed for its triumphs. After 2 terms in office, Madison left Washington, D.C., in 1817 and returned to Montpelier with his wife. Despite the challenges he encountered during his presidency, Madison was respected as a great thinker, communicator, and statesman. He remained active in various civic causes, and in 1826 became rector of the University of Virginia, which was founded by his friend Thomas Jefferson. Madison died at Montpelier on June 28, 1836, at the age of 85, from heart failure. Madison was born into a prominent slave-owning planter family in Virginia. He was a member of the Virginia House of Delegates and the Continental Congress during and after the American Revolutionary War. Dissatisfied with the weak national government established by the Articles of Confederation, he helped organize the Constitutional Convention, which produced a new constitution designed to strengthen Republican government against Democratic assembly. Madison's Virginia Plan was the basis for the convention's deliberations. He became one of the leaders in the movement to ratify the Constitution and joined Alexander Hamilton and John Jay in writing the Federalist Papers, a series of pro-ratification essays that remains prominent among works of political science in American history. Madison emerged as an important leader in the House of Representatives and was a close advisor to President George Washington. During the early 1790s, Madison opposed the economic program and the accompanying centralization of power favored by Secretary of the Treasury Hamilton. Alongside Thomas Jefferson, he organized the Democratic-Republican Party in opposition to Hamilton's Federalist Party. Madison served as Jefferson's Secretary of State from 1801 to 1809, during which time Jefferson made the Louisiana Purchase. Madison was elected president in 1808. Motivated by desire to acquire land held by Britain, Spain, and Native Americans, and after diplomatic protests with a trade embargo failed to end British seizures of American shipped goods, Madison led the United States into the War of 1812. Although the war ended inconclusively, many Americans viewed it as a successful Second War of Independence against Britain. Madison was re-elected in 1812. The war convinced Madison of the necessity of a stronger federal government. He presided over the creation of the Second Bank of the United States and the enactment of the Protective Tariff of 1816. By treaty or through war, Native American tribes ceded 26 million acres, 11 million hectares, of land to the United States under Madison's presidency. Retiring from public office at the end of his presidency in 1817, Madison returned to his plantation, Montpelier, and died there in 1836. Madison was a slave owner. He freed one slave in 1783 to prevent a slave rebellion at Montpelier, but did not free any in his will. Among historians, Madison is considered one of the most important founding fathers of the United States. Leading historians have generally ranked him as an above-average president, although they are critical of his endorsement of slavery and his leadership during the War of 1812. Madison's name is commemorated in many landmarks across the nation, with prominent examples including Madison Square Garden, James Madison University, the James Madison Memorial Building, and the USS James Madison. James Madison Jr. was born on March 16, 1751, March 5, 1750, Old Style, at Belle Grove Plantation near Port Conway in the colony of Virginia, to James Madison Sr. and Eleanor Madison. His family had lived in Virginia since the mid-17th century. Madison's maternal grandfather, Francis Conway, was a prominent planter and tobacco merchant. His father was a tobacco planter who grew up on a plantation, then called Mount Pleasant, which he inherited upon reaching adulthood. With an estimated 100 slaves and a 5,000-acre, 2,000 hectares, plantation, Madison's father was among the largest landowners in Virginia's Piedmont. In the early 1760s, the Madison family moved into a newly built house that they named Montpelier. Madison was the oldest of 12 children, with 7 brothers and 4 sisters, though only 6 lived to adulthood: brothers Francis, Ambrose, and William, and sisters Nellie, Sarah, and Frances. Ambrose helped to manage Montpelier for his father and older brother until his own death in 1793. From age 11 to 16, Madison studied under Donald Robertson, a tutor for several prominent Southern families. Madison learned mathematics, geography, and modern and classical languages, becoming exceptionally proficient in Latin. At age 16, Madison returned to Montpelier, where he studied under the Reverend Thomas Martin to prepare for college. Unlike most college-bound Virginians of his day, Madison did not attend the College of William and Mary, as the lowland Williamsburg climate, thought to be more likely to harbor infectious disease, might have impacted his health. Instead, in 1769, he enrolled at the College of New Jersey, later Princeton University. His college studies included Latin, Greek, theology, and the works of the Enlightenment, and emphasized speech and debate. Madison was a leading member of the American Whig Cliosophic Society, which competed on campus with a political counterpart, the Cliosophic Society. During his time at Princeton, Madison's closest friend was future Attorney General William Bradford. Along with classmate Aaron Burr, Madison completed the college's 3-year Bachelor of Arts degree in 2 years, graduating in 1771. Madison had contemplated either entering the clergy or practicing law after graduation, but instead remained at Princeton to study Hebrew and political philosophy under the college's president, John Witherspoon. He returned home to Montpelier in early 1772. Madison's ideas on philosophy and morality were strongly shaped by Witherspoon, who converted him to the philosophy, values, and modes of thinking of the Age of Enlightenment. Biographer Terence Ball wrote that at Princeton, Madison was immersed in the liberalism of the Enlightenment and converted to 18th-century political radicalism. From then on, James Madison's theories would advance the rights of happiness of man, and his most active efforts would serve devotedly the cause of civil and political liberty. After returning to Montpelier, without a chosen career, Madison tutored his younger siblings. He began to study law books in 1773, asking his friend Bradford, a law apprentice, to send him a plan of study. Madison had acquired an understanding of legal publications by 1783. He saw himself as a law student but not a lawyer. Madison did not apprentice himself to a lawyer and never joined the bar. Following the Revolutionary War, he spent time at Montpelier studying ancient democracies in preparation for the Constitutional Convention. Madison suffered from episodes of mental exhaustion and illness with associated nervousness, which often caused short-term incapacity after periods of stress. However, he enjoyed good physical health until his final years. In 765, the British Parliament passed the Stamp Act, which caused strong opposition by the colonists and began a conflict that would culminate in the American Revolution. The American Revolutionary War broke out on April 19, 1775. The colonists formed 3 prominent factions: Loyalists, who continued to back King George III of the United Kingdom, a significant neutral faction without firm commitments to either Loyalists or Patriots, and the Patriots, whom Madison joined, under the leadership of the Continental Congress. Madison believed that Parliament had overstepped its bounds by attempting to tax the American colonies, and he sympathized with those who resisted British rule. Historically, debate about the consecration of bishops was ongoing, and eventual legislation was passed in the British Parliament, subsequently called the Consecration of Bishops Abroad Act 1786, to allow bishops to be consecrated for an American church outside of allegiance to the British Crown. The new Anglican churches began incorporating more active forms of polity in their own self-government, collective decision-making, and self-supported financing. These measures would be consistent with separation of religious and secular identities. Madison believed these measures to be insufficient and favored disestablishing the Anglican Church in Virginia. Madison believed that tolerance of an established religion was detrimental not only to freedom of religion but also because it encouraged excessive deference to any authority which might be asserted by an established church. After returning to Montpelier in 1774, Madison took a seat on the local Committee of Safety, a pro-revolution group that oversaw the local Patriot militia. In October 1775, he was commissioned as the colonel of the Orange County Militia, serving as his father's second-in-command until he was elected as a delegate to the 5th Virginia Convention, which was charged with producing Virginia's first constitution. Madison had proposed liberalizing the article on religious freedom, but the larger Virginia Convention stripped the proposed constitution of the more radical language of free expression of faith to the less controversial mention of highlighting tolerance within religion. Madison again served on the Council of State from 1777 to 1779, when he was elected to the Second Continental Congress, the governing body of the United States. During Madison's term in Congress from 1780 to 1783, the U.S. faced a difficult war against Great Britain, as well as runaway inflation, financial troubles, and a lack of cooperation between the different levels of government. According to historian J.C.A. Stagg, Madison worked to become an expert on financial issues, becoming a legislative workhorse and a master of parliamentary coalition building. Frustrated by the failure of the states to supply needed requisitions, Madison proposed to amend the Articles of Confederation to grant Congress the power to independently raise revenue through tariffs on imports. Though General George Washington, Congressman Alexander Hamilton, and other leaders also favored the tariff amendment, it failed to win the ratification of all 13 states. While a member of Congress, Madison was an ardent supporter of a close alliance between the United States and France. As an advocate of westward expansion, he insisted that the new nation had to ensure its right to navigation on the Mississippi River and control of all lands east of it in the Treaty of Paris, which ended the Revolutionary War. Following his term in Congress, Madison won election to the Virginia House of Delegates in 1784. As a member of the Virginia House of Delegates, Madison continued to advocate for religious freedom and, along with Jefferson, drafted the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. That amendment, which guaranteed freedom of religion and disestablished the Church of England, was passed in 1786. Madison also became a land speculator, purchasing land along the Mohawk River in partnership with another Jefferson protege, James Monroe. Throughout the 1780s, Madison became increasingly worried about the disunity of the states and the weakness of the central government. He believed that direct democracy caused social decay and that a Republican government would be effective against partisanship and factionalism. He was particularly troubled by laws that legalized paper money and denied diplomatic immunity to ambassadors from other countries. Madison was also concerned about the lack of ability in Congress to capably create foreign policy, protect American trade, and foster the settlement of the lands between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River. As Madison wrote, a crisis had arrived which was to decide whether the American experiment was to be a blessing to the world, or to blast forever the hopes which the Republican cause had inspired. Madison committed to an intense study of law and political theory and also was influenced by Enlightenment texts sent by Jefferson from France. Madison especially sought out works on international law and the constitutions of ancient and modern confederacies such as the Dutch Republic, the Swiss Confederation, and the Achaean League. He came to believe that the United States could improve upon past Republican experiments by its size, which geographically combined 13 colonies. With so many competing interests, Madison hoped to minimize the abuses of majority rule. Additionally, navigation rights to the major trade routes accessed by the Mississippi River highly concerned Madison. He opposed the proposal by John Jay that the United States concede claims to the river for 25 years, and, according to historian Ralph Ketchum, Madison's desire to fight the proposal was a major motivation in his return to Congress in 1787. Leading up to the 1787 ratification debates for the Constitution, Madison worked with other members of the Virginia delegation, especially Edmund Randolph and George Mason, to create and present the Virginia Plan, an outline for a new federal constitution. It called for 3 branches of government: legislative, executive, and judicial, a bicameral Congress, consisting of the Senate and the House of Representatives, apportioned by population, and a federal council of revision that would have the right to veto laws passed by Congress. The Virginia Plan did not explicitly lay out the structure of the executive branch, but Madison himself favored a strong single executive. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. Soon we will publish Part 2. Thank you for watching.